a year after we were signed and we came back to the United States and we toured on You Can't Stop Rock and Roll, they weren't going to release the record because we went over budget by $4,500. Now, let me just put this in perspective. Michael Jackson can go over budget by $750,000. Def Leppard or Fleetwood Mac can go over budget by $2 million. We went over budget by $4,500, and they said, either pay us back or we're not releasing your record.
Oh, wow.
That's how much they hated us. They hated the fact that we signed, but they couldn't stop it because Phil Carson was Atlantic's president in the UK. And they told Phil, you keep them. We don't want anything to do with them. And so we released Can't Stop Rock and Roll, which had a bunch of hit records. And we come back to America, and crickets, like nothing. And we had to figure out a way to pay them back $4,500 to release the album. Think about that for a second.
Mad.
And then we went out and toured with basically no tour support. We had money saved, and we did it in rent-a-cars and trucks. And that went on for a year, okay? That went on for a year, a solid year. And then almost to the week that dougmorris proclaimed that the next person that mentions the name Twisted Sister will be fired, which he said in an A&R meeting in December of '82, almost to the week of that, I was doing some press up at Atlantic, and I had never met Doug, and someone said you should meet dougmorris, and I said, why? He hates my band, and we hate him. And so they take me in the office, and he looks at me, and he basically said, listen, you guys have killed yourself in the last year. Do you know how many records you sold in America? I said, I had no idea. He said, well, you sold 100,000 albums with us not putting a penny into it.
Wow.
And he said, furthermore, I received telegrams, or telexes. In those days, it was telexes, it wasn't faxes. Faxes didn't exist back in those days. And he was getting all these telegrams from local Atlantic reps from around the country. Doug Twisted played here and blew the place apart. How come no support? How come no support? How come no support? How come, like genuinely like, wow, this is an amazing band. How come you're not supporting it? And he went through a whole list of these names of these executives who we knew. And when the chairman of Warner Music in Canada said Twisted played with Dio at the Maple Leaf Garden and blew the place apart, what's wrong with you? And he looked at me and he went, I was wrong. I apologize. And he said, if you give me the right record next year, I'll make you the biggest band in the world. Now, let me just say this. I was respectful when he said it, but I didn't believe a word of it. But he did say these words, and think about how innocent this was. He said, well, you know this new thing called MTV, right? We go, yeah. He goes, well, you know who owns MTV, right? All right, no. He says, well, it's owned by two corporations. And back then, it was owned by two corporations. You'll be surprised. American Express owned 50% of it, and Warner Music owned the other 50% of it, which means they could do whatever they wanted, which means that if Columbia and Universal and EMI wanted to put a video on, they had to go through Warner Music because Warner controlled it all. So he said, give me the right video and the right song and I'll make you the biggest band in the world. And I walked out of the meeting and I had dinner with my brother that night and I told him the story and he said, John, that's the greatest thing in the world. I said, no, it's not. He's full of shit. He's lying like they've always lied to us. But you know what? He did. Hired Tom Werman. We created We're Not Going to Take It. And that's why I'm basically on this show. I Want to Rock became two of the most famous anthems in the history of rock and roll.